All right, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first session of CanWaCH's Gender Equality Week 2020 programming. My name is Megan Aikens, and I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Gender Equality here at CanWaCH. Today, I have the privilege of joining you from Deep River, Ontario, which is the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. I recognize the Algonquins as the customary keepers and defenders of the mighty Kitchissippi and all of her tributaries. I honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory and uphold and uplift the voice and values of our host nation. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am so excited to get to start this amazing week of activities with this exact session. The gender equality training modules have been a project being undertaken by CanWaCH over the past year, and arriving at this point is really an incredible feeling. Having had the opportunity to participate in the piloting of the training this summer, I was able to see firsthand the depth and breadth of the module's content, and I'm confident in the knowledge and immense value add that will be provided to everyone who participates in them. We are so excited to share them with you today. I'm now so delighted to turn the floor over to Jennifer Donville, Acting Director of Gender Equality at Global Affairs Canada, to deliver some opening remarks. Thank you and welcome, Candice.
Merci beaucoup, Megan. Je suis très contente d'être ici avec vous. I'd like to welcome everyone to this event and wish you all a happy Gender Equality Week. Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. La Semaine de l'égalité des sexes découle de l'adoption du projet de la loi C-309, la loi sur la Semaine de l'égalité des genres, qui a reçu sanction royale le 21 juin 2018. Cette législation fait de la 4e semaine de septembre la Semaine de l'égalité des genres. This year's theme, Because of You, celebrates the many trailblazers, activists, advocates, including many of you who are on the call with us today, who are working to advance gender equality within their communities. J'apprécie votre participation en si grand nombre car je suis très consciente des défis imposés par la pandémie de la COVID-19 et la situation difficile dans laquelle se trouve la très grande majorité d'entre vous qui ont peut-être des enfants à la maison, qui ont peut-être d'autres responsabilités au niveau du partage des tâches qui nous sont imposées là en ce moment. I want to take this opportunity to recognize the ongoing work of the Canadian international development sector, its resilience during this unprecedented time, and its ability to swiftly pivot to address COVID-19 as part of its policy and programming efforts has been astounding and very impressive. Nous sommes dans un contexte inédit imposé par la pandémie du COVID et de ses nombreuses conséquences sociales, sanitaires et économiques. Cependant, et plus que jamais, la réponse canadienne doit être à la hauteur des engagements pris à travers notre politique d'aide internationale féministe. Canada remains committed to ensuring that gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls is at the center of its development and humanitarian assistance efforts. It's also at the heart of our foreign policy priorities, I may add as well, and soon to be a more official feminist foreign policy. Part of that commitment is to keep connected with our Canadian partners who work on the ground and to have the chance to exchange between gender equality experts and I appreciate having the chance to feed into this virtual equality, gender equality training today. During this unprecedented crisis, I would like to highlight the importance of innovation and new ways of working, which we are doing today, which all seem like the new normal, but still is, the new ways of working. Implementing trainings and sharing expert gender equality advice. This session represents an important opportunity to respond to technical gaps on gender equality in this sector, as our response to COVID must respond to gender inequalities exacerbated by the global crisis and take into account the disproportionate health, economic, and social impacts on women and girls that we're all very well aware of and seeing more and more of as this crisis deepens. I would like to thank CanWaCH for the continued collaboration, and in line with our commitment to deliver the implementation plan for Canada's civil society partnership for international assistance, I would like to highlight the value of exchanges and meaningful dialogues with the sector. Alors, je vous souhaite une excellente session. Nous avons d'autres représentants aussi de notre pour le plaisir de répondre aux questions un peu plus tard ce matin. Merci.
Thank you so much, Candice. We are now going to be joined by Jennifer Donville, an independent gender equality consultant, who will lead us through the bulk of today's session and who, most importantly, has been lending her brilliance to developing this training. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you. It's really great to have Global Affairs Canada and Candice to have you with us today. Thanks for your words of encouragement and support. And I just want to say as well, welcome to all of the participants. Thanks so much for joining us. Many of you I know, many of you I have yet to meet, hopefully through the rollout and engagement that this training will facilitate. So we'll start off just by doing a brief kind of overview for those of you who aren't familiar with this particular project around kind of how this came to be, what the key objectives are, and a little bit of our journey of development here. First of all, the key objective, and of course one of the key mandates of CanWaCH, is to bring together sector actors to strengthen capacity in a variety of ways, and one of them is in gender equality. And the Gender Equality Working Group at CanWaCH has been working diligently towards that. Many of you might be members of that. If you are, hello, fellow members. And so the overall objective of this training initiative and the development of this capacity building piece has been to strengthen the confidence and capacity of members, both gender equality experts and non-experts, in the application of gender transformative programming. And the key points here is about inclusion. And I think that most gender equality advisors in the room, raise your hands, will know that our objective always has been and continues to be to share the responsibility for the promotion of gender equality and social justice, so that everybody feels that it's a part of their role. And not just siloed amongst gender equality advisors. And so that's a key aspect of what CanWaCH has been hoping to achieve through this exercise. And so just to understand what the priorities are around what this should look like, what this package should look like, and what the product should look like, and the experience. One is that it needs to be relevant for the diversity of CanWaCH's membership and the diversity within membership organizations. And so while the focus is on gender transformative programming and it's situated within the project cycle, it really needs to be a conversation that encourages the type of critical thinking that can also be applied well beyond programming. So for example, amongst communications staff, finance staff, marketing staff, fundraising, et cetera, not just that core program staff, and researchers. We have lots of members that live in the world of research. And so it needs to be relevant in that sense as well. Also understanding a feminist approach and how to apply that to health programming. A lot of the conversations in our sector have been, how do we integrate a feminist approach in a meaningful way to our work and generate a greater and deeper understanding of what that means? And a reflection of general best practices, as well as being aligned with Global Affairs Canada. So there are elements within this package that are very much kind of reflective of, for example, RBM guidance from Global Affairs Canada, but of course, as well, we're looking at other examples from around the world, because we know that while Global Affairs Canada is one of our partners, we also partner with a diversity of donors, implementing partners, et cetera. And so we want it to be responsive to that greater level of engagement amongst members. Accessibility, it's really important that the diversity of membership in terms of size, mandate, and technical capacity. So it needs to be accessible as well to smaller organizations that perhaps don't have devoted gender equality staff. The membership at CanWaCH has a large variety of capacities in terms of gender equality teams. Some of the larger ones have 10, 11 gender equality advisors, and some just have a focal point. And so making a package that can be delivered and is accessible for all of those members is really important. A reasonable time commitment, because nobody has a ton of time to devote to trainings. I think that especially now that many of us are pivoting towards different modalities of working, it needs to be efficient and flexible to our time constraints. And then of course, flexible and responsive in the content. And so much of the content can be adjusted to be specifically contextual to the work of individual organizations, for example, by replacing case studies. A lot of the work asks for participants to reflect on their own experience and build on their own experience in terms of the focus of their work and organization. And then of course, sustainable. So we wanted this to be able to be delivered not just now and not just once, but repeatedly and as needed and as required by membership. And so this is something that we wanted to kind of exist as a permanent resource for members, and as well as having that permanent support. And we'll talk a bit more about that. Ongoing supportive supervision is really important as well. Facilitation is not always the easiest thing, and so it really is important that there is that forum for exchange and support, and that's going to be found to be developed on the CanWaCH website, where you'll find the resources for this probably in the new year. And then also a forum where you can come and say, hey, you know, did anybody deliver this session? What worked, what didn't, et cetera, and things like that, and even sharing great stories about what went well. So in terms of the timeline, just to give folks on the call a kind of broader picture of how we got here. This really started a couple of years ago with the Gender Equality Working Group, the kind of genesis of the working group, and an initial needs assessment that was sent out amongst members of CanWaCH around what type of capacity building specific to gender equality is most needed, in what areas was there greatest interest, what would that look like, what are some of the challenges they would have, what kind of time commitment, all kinds of elements. And a needs assessment then led to kind of a conceptual development, and of course the content development, and looking at you know, what the design would look like, the delivery modality, the specific topics and structure, etc. And much of that was based on the priorities that had been established within the needs assessment. And once the content started to develop, there was an ongoing process of validation of content. Many of you, perhaps on the call, were participants in that validation, and lent your brilliant minds to fine-tune and revise the content and make it responsive and effective. Piloting and rewrites, we had the pleasure of kind of doing a first run-through pilot online with the CanWaCH team in August. And based on that experience and feedback there, we are continuing to work to revise and finalize the materials. And then, of course, as you can see, here we are, the soft launch, Gender Equality Week, and we're super pleased to introduce this whole package to everybody. And shortly, we'll be delivering a series of full training of trainers on the package. And so that will be kind of our end goal, although the arrow does continue well off the page in terms of support and exchange and a community of support for trainers. So a couple of key things just to look at here and highlight. It was really important that this package was responsive to members. And so, as I mentioned, the needs assessment was quite key. And just to highlight that, you know, there was an overwhelming response amongst members of the need for participation in gender equality training and capacity building opportunities, and something that really focused first and foremost on gender transformative approaches to programming. You can see there that the top three priorities were pretty high up. Gender monitoring and evaluation, gender equality and monitoring evaluation, and gender-based analysis. We also had a lot of other interests in other areas as well. Those were the three kind of top areas. And so for the design, it made sense to take a project cycle approach based on how the needs were expressed amongst members. And as I'd mentioned, the process of development based on the needs expressed by members also needed to be a whole process that was consultative and collaborative. And I think that one of the things that was really important to us was that the process of development echoed the principles that we wanted to embody in terms of a feminist approach to the development of this content, it being participatory, inclusive, experiential, etc. So we really wanted to invite the minds and experiences of the membership of Global Affairs Canada and other specialists to contribute to the conversation and bring their breadth of experience and knowledge to the content. And so we had a great opportunity to work with the Gender Equality Working Group, of course. The Metrics Working Group really lent a lot of their brilliance to it as well. Global Affairs Canada technical and partnership teams have been just a consistent support on this and given some really rich and incredible feedback, and really help to validate the content and steer a lot of it in the right direction. And then individual specialist staff that we reached out to various member organizations for specific requests and support. So it really has been a team effort. And I'll also just a shout out to Erin Jex at CanWaCH, who has been my partner in crime in this process. So getting into the nitty-gritty, digging into what this actually looks like. So the content and design, as I mentioned, reflects sector best practices. It takes a participatory approach, including opportunities for discussion, workshopping, and practicum. And it really goes it kind of builds on itself. And so it is a process. The whole package takes individual participants through a process of analysis, design, critical thinking, etc. And so it really builds on, each session builds on the previous one to create hopefully a journey of change where we end up with just a whole slew of gender equality advisors out there. It's designed for facilitators with a medium level of experience. And by that I mean, we really wanted it to not be something that was intimidating or overwhelming for folks who perhaps haven't had years of experience facilitating this type of training. And in that way, we also wanted to make sure that everything that was needed is included in this package. So step-by-step instructions, etc. It's designed for Canadian partners. I think that that's important to note of CanWaCH because it responds directly to the needs assessment within the membership. And of course, CanWaCH's mandate is first and foremost to its Canadian membership. But however, and this has been discussed several times, a lot of the activities and the content have been drawn from a variety of trainings and experiences of contributors that have been delivered in their international programs and to stakeholders and partners around the world. And so once these resources are shared, members should feel free to kind of take that and build their own training to cascade if it's helpful indeed. But the package itself is designed initially and primarily for CanWaCH membership here in Canada. There's two types of modules. There's core modules and targeted modules. The core modules are the ones that will be launched initially. The targeted ones are still under development. And I'll talk a bit about the core and targeted modules next. First, though, the delivery modality, and this is where we've pivoted like everybody else in the last 6 months. There's been some pivots, some hard lefts going on around the world right now, but it's interesting and it's an opportunity, I think, to learn. One of the things that we've pivoted towards, of course, is a virtual learning experience. And in a way, this actually serves the membership more effectively as well, because CanWaCH is a national network, and there are many organizations whose staff are spread across the country. And so having it designed as a virtual learning experience with all the resources available for facilitators, we think actually is more responsive to the needs of the membership. And of course, it's much easier to take that and convert it into a face-to-face program than it is to take a face-to-face program and build a virtual plan around it. And so that's been something that we've been working now to transition the package to. Most importantly, though, it is a cascade model, and I think I've alluded to that. So the idea is that it will come as a package. Kind of like the meal packages that everybody's ordering now to cook at home. Basically, it will be session guides, there will be facilitation notes and guidance, there will be resources and annexes. So any resources required, case studies, etc. for each session will be already there. Tips in terms of things to remember. Each session has key messages and objectives. There's a draft agenda that's included, of course, but it can be broken up and delivered at the convenience of the facilitator who cascades it. And so what that will look like in the coming year will be a series of training of trainers provided by CanWaCH and then the ongoing support, as I'd mentioned, online for those who have received the TOT to cascade to their own organizations within whatever agenda and timeline that works for their team. So the resources, as I'd said, will consist of all of those step-by-step technical resources. Most importantly, with the virtual learning experience, the technical steps will go along with the facilitator steps. So it'll be really straightforward for facilitators and their technical supports to see how to build, the Zoom and the different aspects. One of the key things too, and I'm sure that this will come up, is that we decided not to put this on a learning management system, an LMS. So basically a platform that you have to subscribe to, or that is, overly complex or membership only. The technical guidance provided here is using online tools that are available to anybody. So we use Mural, Zoom, Slido, and other resources. They're also very flexible. So if there is a platform that you use, for example, Microsoft Teams or something, it's easily adjustable to those different platforms. But initially, the guidance that we're creating is using platforms that really any organization can access online. The duration, the core modules are 3 days in total, so the equivalent of 3 days. And if we were doing a face-to-face, we would probably try and do a three-day residential training of some sort. But it's the equivalent time engagement of 3 days. And the targeted modules will be half a day to a full day, the equivalent of a half to a full day. And again, that agenda can be adjusted and broken up and managed in a way that works for individual member organizations. Okay, so the core modules. Like I said, we're kind of taking a project cycle approach here. So really super straightforward. Concepts and terminology is the first module. And this is about really increasing familiarity, but also confidence in the use of key concepts, and not just terminology, but concepts. And so we spend quite a bit of time in the package talking about how can we understand transformative change, not just familiar with the definitions of aware, transformative, feminist, but how do we understand that and how can we relate it to others? Because I think we know when we all have to teach something, we really understand it truly and deeply. And so that's really about getting to kind of the core of what we mean by the type of change we're after. And there's some discussion also in that module around different use of terminology around the world and within Canada as well, but how the change we're all looking for that's transformative really is the same type of change. And so that's kind of establishing just a shared understanding and a shared vernacular right off the bat. Module 2 is about elements of gender transformative programming. And this is where we look at doing some problem analysis from a gender perspective. We do a bit of an RBM refresher just to make sure everyone's on the same page, and start looking at how we can generate gender equality outcomes for transformative programming. And then finally, we move into gender analysis and monitoring and evaluation. And we're looking at how we can make monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning processes more responsive, more empowering, more participatory and inclusive. And so moving those activities more towards a transformative and feminist approach. And we cover indicators and data collection methodologies, etc. So those are the core modules. It kind of takes you through the journey, project cycle journey, a simplified project cycle, not all points in the project cycle, but a simplified one. Yeah. And just to mention that, the targeted modules, based on the needs assessment, what there was most interest in amongst CanWaCH members was feminist approaches in development as a particular deep dive, engaging men and boys, and then walking the talk. So looking at how, as organizations, we actually exemplify the feminist and gender transformative and inclusive principles to which we're trying to strive in our programming. So that's potentially what the 3 targeted modules will look like. Right now, I think we'll probably go back to membership before we finalize that and just kind of do a bit of a refresher and make sure that those are still the top relevant topics. The next thing we want to do is to just give you a flavor. We want to spend quite a bit of time on opening it up for questions and discussion. and give opportunity for all the participants to explore what we've been talking about here. And but first we want to do a little bit of a sneak peek on some of the content that's in the actual modules. This session that we're going to look at, very briefly, we're going to engage you folks in a bit of an activity here. And we haven't done it with quite this many participants, but hopefully it goes smoothly. So one of the sessions that we look at is intersectionality. And this session comes directly after our session on gender diversity. And so what we're looking at in this series of sessions is really looking at how we understand people and in all their diversity, and how we can recognize that diversity and respond to it. And so the first activity in the session is to kind of take the pulse of everyone in the room. Who have we got in the room? And what and how do they identify? And so the learning objective for the session is to understand how power and social privilege can be used to marginalize particular groups, specifically those comprised of intersection identities. And the key message that we want to convey is that people experience different barriers depending on many elements of their identities. And these can include factors like sexuality, race, gender identity, ability, age. I mean, it goes on and on. We identify and describe ourselves in such a multitude of ways. Pursuing true equality means recognizing and meeting all people's diverse needs. And while it's complex, it's abundantly clear when we start to dive into our own individual diversity, how important that is. So the activity that we're going to do, we have a bit of a definition, a theoretical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's identity, race, class, gender, sex, ability, religion, etc., combine to create unique modes of discrimination and privilege. And I think that it's really important that throughout this program that we're looking at ourselves first, right? And self-reflection is a key aspect, I think, to moving attitudes and behaviors around gender equality. And so this activity will ask you to get a bit technical and engage in a Slido with us. So if everybody could follow the link to the Slido, you can also use the QR code on your phone. If you have any issues, like type into Erin or Amanda in the webinar chat and they can answer your questions. But if you go there and give a couple of minutes to for everyone to get onto the Slido site. Don't worry, it's very, very easy. It's also been just an incredible, I'm sure that all of you also have had the experience of exploring just the insane multitude of online tools and platforms for activities. I'm going to do a little plug for Mural because that one is amazing. It's an excellent substitute for flip charts and post-it notes, so check it out. So if everybody's on the Slido, the next step is we're going to ask you to think about your own personal identity and words you use to describe your identity. So whether it's, you know, female, male, cisgender, single, Black, white, First Nations. We have, in the past, we've had people that have said powerful, we've had people who've said intelligent, brilliant, happy, whatever your identity is, and however you describe yourself. You can type in as many words as you want in the Slido. So please take a couple of minutes and dive into yourself and think about how all the words you would use to describe yourself. And once we start to see some results coming in, Erin's going to share them as they come up, and then we'll check back. Okay, and if everyone is looking at the screen as this evolves, we have a lot of different, you'll notice with the word cloud that the more people, it changes as more folks enter identity words. And so what you see is words getting larger the more frequently that they're mentioned, and smaller the less frequently they're mentioned. And so it changes and evolves as more people participate. We have a lot of women on this call. Many, many women. Great. We have daughter, married, femme, kind, Black, mixed race, female, feminist. A lot of feminists on the call too. Good to see. Great. Friend, engineer, leader. That's great. So this is one exercise that we kind of start off with in this session, and one of the ways that we've pivoted to online. This is something that in a face-to-face we could do with post-it notes and a number of different ways to explore our own identities, but tools like this are great for a virtual experience. And I just wanted to highlight how this changes as well with any group. And what's really interesting is if you deliver a training a couple of times and keep screen grabs of the different identity clouds that you see, you can really see how each group has its own unique footprint in the world, and identity makeup. So I think that we'll move on. One of the things that we wanted to do next is to get you to think about how many words you put down. I feel like I could keep typing and typing. The more I think about all the words that are part of my identity and the different aspects of my identity, the more I could type. But the point is that identities are complex and sometimes invisible. They overlap. Some of them we share. Some of them are very unique and rare. And they interact with gender in ways that can amplify or aggravate vulnerabilities and factors of exclusion. And that's really what this session is hoping to get across in the training. And just to say that this is followed up by an activity that many of you might recognize, the Power Walk classic, which explores how these intersecting identities intersect with power to privilege some and marginalize others. So after kind of diving into the diversity of the participants and looking at what that means and how they intersect with each other, we look at how they relate to power and what that means in terms of those who end up with privilege based on their intersecting identities and those who end up more marginalized. And the key takeaways, this is just, again, echoing intersectionality. All of these overlap and interact and determine how people experience privilege and marginalization, and that also intersecting discriminations are unique, and that pursuing true equality means recognizing and meeting all people's diverse needs. So that's just a little taste of some of the content, a fraction of one session, to give you a bit of the flavor of what's to come. So I will turn it over to Megan for the discussion.
Thank you so much, Jen, and thanks for the amazing overview of both the training and that little sneak peek. It's clear that when the training is actually launched, we'll be in a very different format of Zoom. It'll feel a little bit more that sense of togetherness, and then we'll be able to see participants' faces, so for a little bit more of the interaction. I'm wondering now if we have any questions. I know that there was one question that I've just answered in the chat, and I think it's maybe the most basic, but also one of the most pertinent questions, and that's really around when will the full sort of training be available. And I've just advised that we're really excited to be able to offer the first Train the Trainers delivery later this fall. There's going to be a sign up coming later, so that if anyone's interested in receiving notification of the dates, registration links, etc., that will be available. And just to be clear also, that the training will be offered fully in both French and English once it's delivered. we're just finalizing with the COVID adaptations from sort of the originally envisioned in-person delivery to a full virtual delivery. We're just, Jen and team are just working to make sure that that facilitation guide it really has every last detail that it needs to. There was another question here from Meredith around the targeted modules that will sort of be the building on blocks on top of the core modules. We've really been focused on getting these core modules developed, and so hope to begin to think about the subjects and content for those targeted modules early in 2021, but most anxious to make sure that we get the core modules out to all of the membership and the broader development community as soon as possible, and to learn from that delivery and then be able to build upon them. One question, Jen, that was asked was around the timeline, and so how long, you know, from when you had the slide up, it had the arrow that soared off the page, sort of how long it's taken us to reach this point.
Like 4 years? No, just kidding. So the needs assessment was conducted in 2018. But the actual module development started last December, around last December, yeah. So less than a year. I think slowed down a bit by COVID, but still not bad in terms of, you know, what has been a part-time engagement and for the development of it. I think that one of the things that we want to be careful to do is to really make sure that we nail this tech support, as Megan had said, and so taking the time to do that will be important as well. But yeah, so it's been just about, it will have been about a year, yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Jen. So we've got two questions next, one which I'll take, and then one which I'll hand over to you, Jen. The first is, will the training be available to organizations who aren't members? The short answer to that is yes, absolutely. This is really intended to be a public good for the broader development community. It has certainly been developed with the CanWaCH membership in mind and in close consultation with our membership, but has been developed and targeting health programming specifically. But and Jen, maybe I'll let you speak to the sort of broader applicability as well to the content.
For sure, yeah. So you know, we were talking about this, I think, Natalie, we were talking about this last week, or yes, maybe last week, when we had our call with Candace as well. And I think that one of the things that will be valuable more broadly about this content is that while the case studies and a lot of the examples and et cetera are using health sector examples and focusing in on health, obviously because that's CanWaCH's mandate. However, because the membership of CanWaCH is so diverse, you know, the examples and case studies, et cetera, are quite diverse and really take a generalist approach in terms of, you know, coming to gender equality and transformative change from the big picture perspective. And so the content could very, very easily just be adapted for education programming, for economic empowerment programming, for, you know, any variety of programs. One of the things that I think that might be a slight limitation at this point, and it's something maybe to explore in the new year, is the degree to which emergencies and humanitarian content is included. And that's something that can be revisited in the new year as well, in terms of how we can make sure to serve those members and their programming too.
There was a quick question around cost. Again, we have CanWaCH has developed this this training with the support of Global Affairs Canada, and so will be offered it's envisioned to be cost free in its delivery. especially now that we've moved to a virtual platform in which, catering and venue costs are not a consideration. But there was also a question around translation. So as I've mentioned, it will be offered in both French and English, Canada's official languages, but a question about whether it will also be adapted to Spanish and Arabic. And the short answer again is no. Unfortunately, we don't envision that it will be translated to other languages. And Jen, maybe you can just again speak to the vision that this is intended for Canadian partners.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, obviously, when you all become hopefully familiar with the content of the package, you'll see that like the power walk and many other activities, there's a lot of really kind of standard, strong, tried and true facilitation moments that can be easily borrowed and cascaded further to partners. But initially, because it's based on the needs assessment, capacity, and et cetera of our own membership, of the CanWaCH membership, none of the CanWaCH membership, to my knowledge, operates in Spanish or Arabic, I don't think. But obviously English and French are requirement.
There's a question, Jen, around a list of all of the core module topics. Certainly that's something that we'll be sending an email out to all registered participants of the webinar. It will include PowerPoint slides. It will include the recording of this session. We could probably also include a more detailed list, but then did you want to maybe give a quick little walkthrough what each day looks like?
Sure, I don't have it up very directly in front of me, but I can say that, the concepts and terminology starts out with Gender 101 and going through some of the basic terminology of, gender, sex, gender aware, gender transformative, a lot of, and while that might be kind of rudimentary, repetitive for many gender equality advisors, it really is kind of the basic foundation and gets everybody on the same page. But then, as I'd said, moving on then to concepts and going a bit deeper into concepts like position versus condition, access to and control over resources. What does that mean? Concepts like power, etc. And I think that then moves on, if memory serves, I think I have it memorized now, that moves on to looking at gender diversity and intersectionality. And then we look at gender equality from a socioecological standpoint. So looking at different socioecological levels, individual, relational, community, very much echoing the approach that many of our membership organization takes in terms of how they analyze communities of work. And I think that that's the totality of the concepts and terminology session. The programming session looks at a problem analysis from a gender perspective. We look at rights bases versus instrumentalists perspective, and go into how we can do a holistic as well. So we revisit all of these elements as we're doing our problem analysis. And then going into the identification of gender equality outcomes. We do a tiny, as I mentioned, a tiny RBM refresher, just so to get everybody on the same page. And then actually building outcomes, like in a practical sense, building outcomes into a logic model based on our problem analysis and going from there. And then we critically analyze our logic models together as a group, and make sure and ask ourselves, are we looking at rights-based approaches? Are we looking at a socio-ecological approach in terms of all stakeholders? Are we looking at gender equality from a holistic standpoint, et cetera? So then we go into monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning. And we look at how that exists on a spectrum from gender sensitive to transformative and feminist, and what that means for different monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning activities. And we kind of go through some of the basics of M&E without going too deep, because it isn't an M&E training, but we do look at what does it mean to have indicators that measure empowerment and agency, and how can we do that effectively, and what does that mean in terms of indicators, and also what does it mean in terms of data collection and data sources. So that's kind of, I think I've hit on pretty much all of the elements, but absolutely we can make sure that a list of individual sessions gets out to folks with the resources shared from this webinar.
Thanks so much, Jen. And we have, I'm going to turn it over now to a question from the floor.
So Natalie is asking us, how can we avoid the perception by some colleagues that doing a one-off gender training ticks the box on their knowledge and gender competency, and that it's not just a singular moment in time? And I love this question because it's so important, because it really is something that needs to be continuously built on. And I think that two answers to that. One is that there's a focus within, especially the discussions within the package on implementation challenges, where we look at when we're designing transformative programming, what are some of the implementation challenges in terms of financial resources, human resources, and timelines planning. And what we know is that transformative change, changing attitudes and values and social norms, takes longer, it takes more money, and it takes slightly higher skill levels, especially when we talk about monitoring and evaluation that is truly feminist and transformative and empowering. In participation in that monitoring activity is empowering for the participant. So it introduces some complications, and it also requires additional resources. And the point there is that, the end kind of key message of that session is that gender equality is really the responsibility of our finance and budget folks, of our human resource people and program managers, of our M&E colleagues, of our, so building on that shared responsibility so that people understand in a practical sense how this applies to their work. And thereby, ideally, they're not just thinking, oh, I've watched this, I've done this training, and so now I'm good. It's basically a call to action to say, what are the implications in your work, regardless of what your role is within the team. And then the second, sorry, there's two parts. The second part is that hopefully the ongoing community of support can help keep the training relevant and alive within organizations. But in addition, some of the targeted modules. So the fact that there will be more resources coming down the chute to kind of keep people learning and keep the topic at the forefront of the conversation within programs.
Thanks so much, Jenna. And maybe, again, building off sort of the deep importance of the work, there's a question in the Q&A box around where can the training be found? But how can that intersect with women's identities and racialized neglected communities, or others such as women identities with disabilities? So I think it comes back to the intersectional discussion that we initiated today, but I'm wondering if you can speak to how this training is positioned sort of in that intersectional approach.
Sorry, the delivery of the training or the content of the training? So I think the first part of the question was, where will the training be located? So in the plan is that the training will be located wherever is convenient for everyone. In terms of the resources will be available through CanWaCH's website. So in terms of the PowerPoint will be prepared. The step-by-step facilitation guidance and technical guidance will be there. The facilitation tips and tricks and advice will be included as well. So it's really supposed to be a complete package. And in terms of the content and looking at intersecting identities in the content, it's really right off the bat is conversations around diversity and around gender diversity and intersecting identities. And it's laid out very early in the training through the discussion of training principles. And oftentimes, tell me also, I'm not sure who asked this question, but if I'm not answering it, please do shout out and let me know. But oftentimes in trainings, what we do is we invite participants to kind of define the code of conduct, which is great, and it's participatory, and that's fine. However, we felt it was really important at the beginning to list out a set of principles that were non-negotiable, really, because we are taking a stand in terms of being inclusive, feminist, and really having a non-discriminatory environment and experience and a safe space. And so at the very outset, There's a discussion around the principle of respectful participation, of being inclusive, of being respectful of diversity, etc. And so it's laid out right at the beginning, as well as the deep dives later on in the sessions themselves. I hope that answered the question.
I hope so too. And if it hasn't, please feel free to reach out again and we can dig a little bit deeper. There is a question, I think just again about the principles of accessibility, and certainly one thing that we can take away. So it will be, of course, offered in both French and English, but a question around closed captioning and whether that might be available in the training offering as well. I think that that's a takeaway for us to explore from a technical perspective, how that could be integrated. Certainly CanWaCH has endeavored to use closed captioning in the past with some varying degrees of success in terms of the technical tools, but I think it's really an important point for us to consider, especially at this particular moment. It's coming at a perfect time when we're really thinking through all of those technical elements and how we can make sure that the training really is the strongest and most accessible it can possibly be. The next, so there was a question, and maybe we can come back to it, Jen, around how long it actually takes. So the trainer might take, but then how long it would take in terms of length of time to deliver the content. We've certainly been thinking about it because it's quite different, as Jen mentioned in her opening remarks, about in-person versus virtual.
So it was actually really interesting to, so full disclosure, when we went to do the pilot with CanWaCH, we were still thinking optimistically that this was going to be a face-to-face. And part of that was that, you know, my own experience as a trainer, and many of you will share this experience, was a little bit skeptical of the degree to which we could have the kind of really intimate exchanges that I feel a good gender equality training requires, where you really share your own self-reflections, create a safe space of trust where you can see people's faces. And you'd see on one of the slides, the objective slide, we had a screenshot of all the folks from CanWaCH on Zoom. And after we kind of did an online delivery of the content that was kind of not really, it was doing an online delivery of a face-to-face training, we realized that, you know, we can do this. We can have this with, you know, we had, I think, 25 people, and we really had excellent conversations. We had intimate exchanges that really felt like we were resonating and connecting with each other. And so I think it was because of that, and then also because of discussions of, wow, this looks like this might, this virtual world might persist a bit longer than we'd kind of hoped or envisioned, that it really was our responsibility to pivot to virtual. Having said that, we need to work out the timings. So face-to-face, I can tell you the timing of a session like that. Virtual, we're going back and kind of looking at the timings of all the sessions now that we've reorganized them a bit into virtual. The sessions are changing a little bit. So for example, we're doing less reporting back, because that can really kill momentum, et cetera. And so looking at how we can kind of tighten things up. Having said that, it's going to be about 3 days in total of training content. And that, I think, would be best delivered broken up into half days, or, you know, like 3/4 days, or whatever works for your organization. But what we did was we did 1 half day and then 2 full days. And I think we found the full days to be a little bit much. So our recommendation with the package would be to, you know, do perhaps a series of 3-hour morning sessions or something like that, something that works with the availability of your organization. But the total kind of aggregate exposure time is going to be about the equivalent of a 3-day engagement. There will also be prep time for facilitators. So while all the resources are there, facilitators really will need to spend the time to kind of go through and make sure that they're familiar with the PowerPoints and the flow of the sessions, and that they've read through the resource materials and really feel like they're ready to go. And the tech support person for them is, of course, as well.
Thank you, Jen. And I'm so sorry, Natalie. I think you were trying to jump in on the last question and answer, so I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Actually, all I want, it's actually a really good moment for me to jump in because I just want to reinforce a lot of what Jen has been saying about the core modules and how all of the concepts, even though they're set up to be a 3-day full time engagement, can actually be parceled out in more like synopses, you know, like of engaging on different issues. Like there might also decide that your organization might need more reinforcement in certain areas, like intersectionality, for instance, or instrumentalization. Sorry, English is not my first language, but I think I got that word out okay. I find that those concepts sometimes are really key for designing a training that can actually meet the need for not only the context, but also for areas where people need more training in particular, conceiving of particular concepts and how it applies to their everyday work. So I feel like the design of the core modules is really, really well done from that perspective. And I look forward actually to working more on with you on the targeted modules, especially in our virtual space. It's really good to be able to do this in much smaller increments. And it's a really exciting platform you guys have. And I think the activity we did was really fun. So, and I wasn't sure with virtual how engaging it can be, but it was quite engaging. So thank you for that. And I just wanted to add that as people think about how they could actually use the core modules. So that's not just A, B, C, but it can actually be used in a much more consistent way within the organization's context. Hope that helps. Thanks.
Thanks, Natalie. And I'm sorry, I should have more properly introduced you. That Natalie is a colleague joining us from the Gender Equality Specialist team at Global Affairs Canada, and has been working really closely with CanWaCH as we've been validating the content and making sure that that it's well aligned with GETM priorities and thinking as well. We do have, again, a question, and I just want to, because it's coming in quite a few times around who can partake in the training, how many people per organization can partake, etc. So then I'll turn that one over to you. But the first, I think, again, is that this will be open training to the CanWaCH membership as well as broader development community. And there's no cost envisioned at this moment in time, and so but maybe around number of people per organization. I'll turn that over to you, Jen.
Sure. So I think a couple of things. One is that the TOT will obviously be optional, right? So CanWaCH will be offering TOTs in English and French for the package once the French translation is completed and ready, and that will be optional and free, and online and virtual, optional, free, and virtual. And then, you know, really it's a matter of folks taking the package with all the resources and instruction and then organizing their own cascade within their organization. Obviously, that would probably be a bit easier having attended a TOT and had a chance to walk through the content, but of course it's not required. And, you know, somebody who's got tons of experience facilitating will just pick up the packet and be like, oh, obviously. But the nice thing about it is that the activities are planned already, the PowerPoints are there, the suggested tech exercises are there and everything. So it really kind of makes that bridges that resource gap, hopefully for a lot of organizations. In terms of size, what we found, like what was really nice, and I wanted to mention this actually when Natalie was talking too, she reminded me of it. What we found worked really well, and this will be in the tech tips for the package, when we did our first kind of run through with CanWaCH, was going as often back to this gallery view that we're in now. So we had quite a few moments of discussion in plenary when we had all 20 participants on the screen, and you could see everybody's faces, you could see their engagement, you could see them smiling or laughing, you can kind of get a sense of, like, take the pulse of the group and get a sense of kind of, is everybody with me? Do I need to kind of revisit? You can see when people unmute and you're like, oh, Aminata, I see you unmuted. Did you want to sneak in with something? You know, and kind of really stay in touch with your participants. And so for that reason, I would say probably it would be most effective. And also because there's group work, etc. with, you know, I would say 25 at the most participants, I would think, would make it manageable, would afford some good group work, but also would allow the space for everybody to participate in those kind of plenary touch points, and for facilitators to actually fit everybody's faces on a screen, which is nice. It actually, to me, felt surprisingly intimate. So I hope that answers the question. So we'll do probably the TOTs would be about 25, and then our recommendation would be that it's delivered to about 25 staff at a time.
That's perfect, Jen. And I think that we have actually managed to get to all of the questions, although I'd like to do sort of a last call if there's anyone else who has a burning question. Would be how, do I see another one coming in? So there's a question specifically around Interactio and the translation service that we're using. Maybe what I could do is actually ask my colleague Erin to post contact details for my colleague Tina La Rochelle, who manages our relationship with Interactio, because unfortunately I don't have the technical or the knowledge specifically. It is a service that CanWaCH enlists and adds on to our webinars and capacity strengthening activities, but we'd be happy to share that information if you're interested, and just encourage you to reach out directly to my colleague. I'm not seeing, I don't think, any further questions. So again, just want to take.
Sorry, Megan, just one last one. There was a question around whether individual members or only organizational members can sign up for the TOTs, and I would say any member can sign up for the TOT. Yes.
Yeah, CanWaCH member, CanWaCH associates. Yeah, it's really intended. Our overall goal, and Jen, you always say it so well, is just to create. I don't want to use military language.
No, I know.
Just to create a groundswell of allies and champions who are working in whatever aspect of work that Canadians are undertaking to deliver gender transformative change and programs here in Canada, around the world. And so really trying to, we want to get this into as many folks' hands as we possibly can. And so it's not intended to be restrictive or exclusive in any way.
And I think the way that we've talked about it before is that, like, if you're sitting there and saying, is this, like, does this expertise area belong to me, or is this my thing? The answer for gender equality is always yes. It always belongs to you. It is always your thing. So yeah, everybody's welcome, and hopefully we've made it accessible enough that everyone feels that they're at home there, and it hits at the right level for them.
So, and just to reiterate, the goal would be, I think, especially at the outset, to make sure that we can get this training to as many organizations and individuals as possible, that we kindly ask one individual per organization in the initial rollout to participate, because as we do anticipate that there will be considerable interest, and just want to make sure that we can, that it's cascaded to as many of our members and partners as it possibly can. But that we'll be offering the TOT or train the trainer on an ongoing basis, and so there could be future opportunities for organizations to send a second or third person, and recognizing that there's organizational change as well as people move in and out of roles. So we will we'll start maybe from that premise. This is a new endeavor for CanWaCH, certainly, to do this type of initiative, and we're really excited, but also we'll ask members and partners to bear with us a little bit as we manage the rollout. So with that, I just want to thank everyone so sincerely for joining us today. I hope it was insightful and informative, but most importantly, I hope that you're all excited to partake in the training once it's formally launched. Posted in the chat box. If it's not there, it will be there momentarily. There's going to be a link to a Google form, which I alluded to earlier. For anyone who's interested in participating in a future training session, we just ask that you complete this form so that we can keep you well informed and reach out when the training is scheduled later this fall. I also just hope to see more of you at CanWaCH's sessions that are being offered throughout today and tomorrow. Coming up next, beginning at 12 noon, we have 2 concurrent lunch and learn sessions, one on proposal writing with a GE lens, and the second one on measuring empowerment. If you haven't already done so, there'll be a sign-up link as well on the CanWaCH website. And just also going to do a shout out tomorrow. We have a really engaging panel discussion at 11 a.m. On feminist programming. So we'll be joined by Minister Karina Gould, as well as Kate Higgins from Oxfam, Jocelyn Mackey from Grand Challenges, and Remy from the Equality Fund. And we are really excited. It's going to be a great couple of days. But most importantly, I wish you all a very happy Gender Equality Week.